You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Saying space is hard does come across sometimes a little bit like thoughts and prayers, but for space. Still, we don't want to be too down on launch companies when anomalies inevitably occur, especially those working on offering healthy competition to SpaceX. So while nobody likes a RUD, better luck next time and try again, Rocket Lab.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
Today is September 19th, 2023. I'm Maria Varmazes, and this is T-minus. Rocket Lab experiences a RUD. AST SpaceMobile makes the first 5G call between a cell phone and a satellite. Millennium Space Systems achieved operational readiness of the VICTUS NOX space vehicle just 37 hours after launch. And our guest today is Kate Van Dam, head of strategy at SkyFi on Earth observation platforms for commercial use. Stay with us. Let's take a look at our intel briefing for today. It absolutely stinks to report on an anomaly, but that is the news, unfortunately, from the launch of We Will Never Desert You, which was Rocket Lab's 41st mission this morning for Capella Space from Mahia, New Zealand. Now, liftoff of the Electron rocket was successful, and the rocket also successfully completed its first stage burn and stage separation. But right around the point at that stage 2 ignition started, about 2.5 minutes into flight, an anomaly occurred, and unfortunately, with the second stage failure, a loss of vehicle was declared, meaning a mission failure. In addition to the Electron rocket, a Capella Space Acadia radar imaging satellite, the Capella 12, was also lost. Nobody likes a rapid unscheduled disassembly, and Rocket Lab founder and chief executive Peter Beck least of all. He wrote this on X, aka Twitter. Tough day. My deepest apologies to our mission partners, Capella Space. Team is already working on root cause. We'll find it, fix it, and be back on the pad quickly. In Rocket Lab's 41 flights so far, this is the 4th failure, with stage separation and ignition of the second stage proving to be the source of a lot of headaches for the company. It is tough out there for space stocks right now, and unfortunately, Rocket Lab's stock dropped a little over 7% today in the news of the anomaly, mostly negating any gains made this calendar year, currently trading a little over $4.5 a share. AST SpaceMobile has successfully made the first ever 5G connection for voice and data between an everyday, unmodified smartphone and a satellite in space. The company demonstrated a call from Maui, Hawaii, USA, to a Vodafone engineer in Madrid, Spain, using AT&T Spectrum and AST SpaceMobile's Blue Walker 3 test satellite. The 5G call was placed from an unmodified smartphone located in a wireless dead zone in Hawaii. In a separate test, the company also broke its previous space-based cellular broadband data session record by achieving a download rate of approximately 14 megabits. I can't even get connectivity in my kitchen. I don't know about you, but we're still buzzing about last week's VICTUS NOX launch. And we've just found out that there's merch, which is pretty great. And the latest news is that Millennium Space Systems completed checkout and achieved operational readiness of the VICTUS NOX space vehicle just 37 hours after launch. That's 11 hours ahead of the 48-hour goal. Full mission operability comes only days after the 60-hour activation and 24-hour launch notifications were given by Space Force leadership. This is a huge achievement by all the companies involved, and again, congratulations. ABL has been selected by U.S. Space Systems Command's Assured Access to Space Office for a tactically responsive launch demonstration. The $15 million contract is part of ABL's existing strategic funding increase and tactical funding increase program contract, and complements the company's ongoing work for low-cost, flexible launch, supporting tactically responsive space. And NASA is preparing for Artemis 2, with a series of ground demonstration tests at Kennedy Space Center. According to NASA, these integrated system verification and validation tests will put the mobile launcher, Launchpad 39B, and in some cases, the 4 astronauts flying on the mission to work, evaluating that the ground equipment is ready to support launch. The first test is slated for later this month and will demonstrate activities required to get the crew to their spacecraft and rocket on launch day. Following completion of all the testing, teams will roll the mobile launcher to the vehicle assembly building slowly to prepare to integrate the Artemis II moon rocket. Woohoo! NOAA has awarded a commercial weather data pilot contract to Spire Global Subsidiary Incorporated for an ocean surface winds pilot program. The study will demonstrate the quality and impact of commercial data on NOAA's weather forecast models. This contract award constitutes the next round of NOAA's commercial weather data studies, with a particular focus on ocean surface wind data. The contract amount was not disclosed with the announcement. And this next story is no bullpucky. A chemical manufacturing company in Japan has been working on creating liquid biomethane from cow waste to be used as rocket fuel. And you want to know how they transform cow poop into fuel? Well, they ferment the dung and urine in a plant constructed on a dairy farm, makes sense, before transporting the generated biogas to a factory in Obihiro. The methane is then separated from the product, cooled, and made into liquid biomethane. Simple, right? Air Water Incorporated says it will begin conducting trials this year with the fuel to be loaded on a rocket created by space startup firm Interstellar Technologies Incorporated. Gives new meaning to this mission is BS, because yes, it really might be. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says the first Venezuelan man or woman could land on the moon on a Chinese spacecraft. Maduro visited Beijing last week and signed a host of agreements to extend cooperation, including in space. The countries agreed to train Venezuelan astronauts in China, with plans to eventually send them to the moon. Munich-based company VITA has successfully raised 3 million euros in funding. The geospatial software company helps infrastructure investors manage impact sustainably, assessing, monitoring, and reporting climate risk and other critical environmental markers. VITA was established in 2018 with support from the European Space Agency. And somewhat related, stay with us for our chat on commercial Earth observation platforms with SkyFi's Kate Van Dam. That concludes our intelligence briefing for today, but you'll find links to further reading on all of the stories we've mentioned in the show in our show notes, along with a piece on the U.S. Department of Defense space monitoring challenges, and a piece for anyone starting in the space industry with an article from the Space Review called How to Land a Space Gig. They're all at space.n2k.com, and just click on this episode. Hey T-Minus crew, if you're just joining us, be sure to follow T-Minus Space Daily in your favorite podcast app. And also, if you could do us a favor, share the intel with your friends and coworkers. Now, here's a little weekly challenge for you. By Friday, we would love if you would show 3 friends or coworkers this podcast. A growing audience is the most important thing for us, and we would love your help as part of the T-Minus crew. If you find T-Minus useful, and we really hope you do, please share it so other professionals like you can find the show. Thanks so much. It means a lot to me and all of us here at T-Minus. Our guest today is Kate Van Dam, Head of Strategy at commercial Earth observation platform SkyFi. Now, I wanted to know the story behind SkyFi and how the company arrived at what they're doing today.
We are the geospatial hub for the world and the place you go for all things Earth observation. We have 2 co-founders at SkyFi, Bill Perkins, who is, depending on the day, one of your most successful oil and gas traders. At one point, he wanted to just get some satellite imagery and was surprised that It took him 6 months, lots of salespeople. It was an extremely cumbersome process. And a lot of that is just dictated by the fact that most of these companies, even in new space, are really incentivized by where the fundings come from, which is, of course, the government. And so Bill met our other co-founder, Luke Fisher, who is our CEO, and SkyFi came about. And really the way that we look at this is satellite imagery should be easy to access. You shouldn't have to talk to a salesperson. You shouldn't have to have a lot of money. You should be able to buy archive image. There are satellites going around all the time. So we really look at it at SkyFi in 3 verticals. First, we have our standard platform. There, you right now can go on skyfi.com, or you can download the app. You can task a satellite. You can purchase satellite imagery. And the cool thing is right now it's just satellites, but we have atmospheric balloon partners, and we're really looking to integrate anything that takes a picture of Earth. The second portion is open data, right? So many of your listeners will be familiar with Sentinel and Landsat, which are, ESA and then the NASA USGS satellites, and that's free, right? Usually 10-meter resolution, but you can still use it for a ton of different things. The problem is open data does not mean accessible data. What we're doing is we're integrating open data onto our platform, and you can, for free, pull Sentinel-2 data off. That's what we're starting with. So we're excited about that. And then the final pillar that we are is insights. And like the way that we look at our platform with all these partnerships, Insights is our analytical platform. And in that case, you're going to be able to, we're partnering with different analytical partners, whether they're indie devs. So any indie developers out there listening to the podcast, we're very interested in what you can bring to the table, or like AI companies, things like this. And so those are really platform, open data, insights is how we're looking at bringing really the world more accessible to everyone.
There's a lot of partners that SkyFi is working with. I would love to know, what kind of insights, the value that these partners are bringing, and what kind of things you're seeing people doing with these partnerships.
Yeah, it's really cool. So the markets that currently exist, and again, we're big believers in this market isn't even open yet, right? There's a lot of folks out there that don't even know how and when to use Earth observation imagery. But right now we're working with city planners. You have your real estate, agriculture. Ag is obviously big, but again, that's a very large market that hasn't necessarily been accessible unless you are a large ag company. Mining, and so we have really great relationship with mining company, and also the regulators, right? And so that's kind of the cool thing is when you're bringing something that is just really, it's truth, right? It's imagery, and then the analytics added to that, you have that. Then you have finance, so hedge funds, and actually we've been talking to some crypto folks, insurance, and then disaster response. And I think the tragedies that we're seeing in Maui and places like this really support how useful even before and after imagery can be, whether it's in the middle of a disaster or in response to one, or even ideally in preparation for it. And then also the government, right? So we're really nascent. We're actually looking at some cool NATO opportunities, so not just within the US, and some NGO use cases that really overlap it. We've been talking to some demining, a NGO coming out of Switzerland that's working on the Kharkiv region of Ukraine. And so there's a lot of these use cases that really overlap. So it's not necessarily boutique to industry when you start putting this together as an aggregate.
That makes sense. And you mentioned sort of areas where it's underutilized. And I'm always fascinated by where people see opportunity for EO to really make an impact that people didn't think of it before. Because even now, some of the markets where it's being used, I think if you had told me 5 years ago that's how it'd be used, I'm like, wow, really? That's such a cool idea. I never would have thought of that. So I am curious where you think more inroads could be made, what other industries could be using it.
One of the interesting things that I never even thought about, and again, is logistics. And we have a company that's actually using SkyFi data. They're a construction company, but they're like, look, every week we have to take and change how you move around a construction site. Right. And so this isn't some big corporation. This is a construction company. And they're like, and we can just pull an image off of your database. And they're like, instead of paying someone to go out with a drone and then map it, we can literally just order and have that in our inbox. And so it's even like what we would, I think what would traditionally be deemed a small use case I mean, that could be huge. People are doing construction all over the world. There are some really cool conservation efforts too that I think can use it. I have a little bit of a bleeding heart, so I love to figure out, how can we get somebody sitting, an NGO worker, I don't know, an MSF or International Red Cross sitting in Darfur, right, in response to moving logistics in a country with limited infrastructure, basic data literally right to the palm of their hand in order for them to make a decision that is based on updated data and right there. There's no convoluted requirements or anything like that. So I think it's in a lot of what we, again, would deem those small use cases that can make really big impact. And, I always use the example of GPS, right? 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that was really just for government and military use. And now, I think we're raising an entire generation that may find it challenging to use a paper map,
That makes me feel very old, but yes.
Right? Me too.
Yes.
But I do think that I hope, and we are betting on it, SkyFi, that we're going to get there with Earth observation imagery too.
It blows my mind that in some cases, and actually many cases, it's cheaper and easier to use a satellite than a drone. That's just that's still just sticking with me a little bit, because that's that we are at that point is amazing. I'm curious about your thoughts on partnerships with the federal government. I know that it's an area that NASA and the government is saying they want to do better on. I wanted to ask what your thoughts were. I don't know if you can comment on it, but if you can, I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Where we really see ourselves fitting into the federal government or NATO or even some of the different space agencies out there is really kind of using our platform as that integrator of all the different satellite companies. Governments can bring their own, obviously, in that case, onto the platform that would be obviously built for them, and also their own insights and analytical tools. Working with the government is a challenge. And I will tell you that we have some amazing, brilliant developers. A lot of them came from Uber. They're all in NATO countries, but even just getting a white paper through to do something that really has nothing specific to do with military or anything, but really has to do in aggregating, harmonizing different imagery in order to make it better for analytical tools is so restrictive to anyone outside of we are a US company. There's no dev from any other countries that test our system. We take all of the API, which everybody brings their own API to the table when it comes to the satellite imagery, and we integrate it into, and we create our own SkyFi specific API. So you can actually plug directly into that if you already have an analytical platform. So there's nobody else's dev touching our dev, right? And we have amazing developers and SMEs. And again, these are all coming out of NATO countries, but there's so much hesitation even to get a Canadian in on any sort of work with the US government. I have found it to be a challenge I didn't expect. And remember, I came from In-Q-Tel before this, right? So
yeah.
I've been on that side of the house, and I've seen it from the inside. But now really looking through the restrictions around that, I think that it's limiting us. It's absolutely to expect a pre-Series A company to move as quickly as we do and have such an amazing UX as we do, and to expect all of that to, one, be able to be affordable with only US engineers, and also to expect that only the brightest and the best and the coolest and the most forward-leaning are only going to come out of here, I think is unfortunately so limiting. And that's even trying to look at NASA opportunities,
We'll be right back. Welcome back.
Teddy told me that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. It's a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone.
Now, I don't have to look for much of an excuse to use a quote by Don Draper of Mad Men, to be honest, but that very famous bit about the nature of nostalgia feels right when we're introducing a new term that's related, noctalgia. This is not the pain of an old wound, no, but this mix of Latin and Greek is a new term coined to describe the pain of not being able to see the stars in a dark night sky. This term is meant to encompass the impact of light pollution, not just from us blasting artificial light on the ground, but also the increased brightness of the skies caused by satellites in low Earth orbit, an issue that many astronomers have and continue to raise as a serious issue for their work. And dark skies are so much of an issue that it was actually the focus of a special issue of the journal Science just this past summer entitled Losing the Darkness. Noctalgia, say Aparna Venkatasan and John C. Barentine, who coined the term, is an expression of sky grief. And that sky grief encompasses the accelerating loss of the home environment of our shared skies, representing loss of science, heritage, millennia-old sky traditions, place-based language, and more. Noctalgia. There's something to think about next time you turn on the lights. And that's it for T- for September 19th, 2023. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like T- are part of the daily routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. This episode was produced by Ellis Carruth, mixing by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Brandon Karpf. Our chief intelligence officer is Eric Tillman. And I'm Maria Varmazes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.